Welcome to another episode of your Joyful Order podcast. Today, we're diving into something we all strive for, a way to be productive without the stress. We'll be talking about how to peacefully pursue your day using the power of journaling to boost both your productivity and your inner calm. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by your to do list or struggle to start your day with clarity and intention, this episode is for you. My guest, Samantha, is a journal coach who has transformed her own life through journaling, and she's here to share how you can create joyful productivity in your own life. My intention for today's episode is to help you discover how small, mindful practices like journaling can create space for both peace and productivity in your life. As you listen, I encourage you to reflect on how you can approach your day with more calm, more clarity, and more joy using these tools not to only get more done, but to feel more grounded and present while doing it. Hey everyone, I'm Leslie Martinez, and you're listening to your Joyful Order podcast. Each week, I will bring you joyful stories that will motivate and inspire you, and at the same time, bring order to your everyday life. Let's just say the show will be a mixture of preaching and teaching with a kick of motivation from your girl here. Welcome to your Joyful Order podcast. Today, my guest is Samantha Hawley, and she's a journal coach who has navigated the challenges of life transition, including moving 8 times in 10 years. Good Lord. She's gone through motherhood, career shifts, all while finding solace in journaling. Through this practice, she discovered her voice and began living more intentionally. Samantha now helps others using journaling to unlock inner peace and joy, especially during times of change. So she's here today to share how we can incorporate journaling into our routines to foster productivity and calm. So welcome to the podcast, Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you, Samantha. Now, you gave me a very in-depth bio that I read, and I was like, "Wow, Samantha has gone through some stuff." And I was just about to like share, the bio and how you gave it to me, but I'm like, no, I want her to tell her story because I think it's so significant into how you got to where you are now. So if you can just share a little bit of your journey because it's so inspiring. And then if you can also share with my audience how journaling became your go-to tool for navigating through some of the tough transitions that you've gone through.
Yeah. So I wasn't always a journal coach, and that's not what I set out to become. I did journal, a while ago, and journaling back then looked to me like I am statements, affirmations like I am healthy and wealthy, and, statements like that, or very basic gratitude journaling like I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful for, my family, things like that. And it felt good for a moment, but it didn't make me, like, feel a shift or anything. But it did the job for, like, what I was looking for at the time. And then COVID hit. I feel like everybody has a COVID story, right? Of, like, what happened in their life at that point. And for me, I was pregnant during COVID. I had a COVID baby. And one of those 8 moves that you mentioned was from Maine. I was living in Maine with my husband at the time, and we had moved down when I was 7 months pregnant to the Outer Banks. And we didn't know anybody in Maine or the Outer Banks, but he had gotten a job down there. And that is where we had our son, Griffin, in October. And I remember I was a first-time mom, no friends or family or any support down there, and I also owned my own business, and it was just like overwhelm is such a broad term, but it was just this like mental and emotional and even physical like explosion on the inside. From the outside, I appeared calm and fine and happy, but internally I was like, what is happening? There's so many responsibilities and so much going on and so many emotions behind each and every one of those tasks too. And I like, needed to get it out, but I couldn't verbalize it even at the time, and so I remember I was sitting on the couch with my partner, and I excused myself. I was like, "I just need to journal for a little bit," and I grabbed like a random notebook that I had lying around. I locked myself in our spare bedroom because I was like, there's something going on inside, and I don't know if I'm gonna cry or scream, like, and I didn't want him to walk in on me, so I locked myself in. I wrote "vent sesh" at the top of the page, and I think I wrote for 3 pages, just, like, venting about work and being a mom and, like, all the responsibilities and trying to balance it, and then relationship stuff too of, like, with arguments that we may have been having or, like, the silent treatment that I was getting at times and, like, what I wanted and what he wanted and all the things. And there were no solutions that came out of journaling, but it was potentially the first time that I was really honest with myself of what I was going through and what I wanted almost, and I let my walls down of, like, that positive Sam that I always was. I was always, like, the optimistic person, and I let it be okay to not be okay, and it felt so good and so freeing, and so that's when journaling took a completely different spin for me, more than just, like, the I am statements and this simple gratitude. And then from there, back to my story, in January, we had moved back to my hometown for more support. And then in July, my partner and I separated and we got divorced. It actually ended up being Valentine's Day the following year, it was a happy divorce. I was the one that chose to leave. But he actually moved down to Florida that September. So when my son was 10 months old, I got full custody. So speaking of it, peaceful productivity, I mean, so much got added to my to-do list, like the full care, and the emotional to-do list too of like all of that responsibility too. So yeah, from that point on, it's just been me and my son and the businesses that I run and managing all of that with the help of journaling too.
Wow. I'm just hearing you and literally I'm getting chills because you've gone through so much in just a short amount of time. Moving, having a baby, and then going through a divorce, and that's definitely a lot to take in. I know for me personally, like, I share so much here on this platform. Journaling is not new for my audience, first and foremost, because I know the power of journaling also. It's just always nice to get people's different perspectives, and I love how you shared that you did a vent session, like, you literally wrote vent session. 'Cause I call them, like, my cry to God sessions because I will write those out sometimes where I'm like, "God, I just need you." But I love that I might reframe those of, like, "I'm just venting right now," because it like you, I'm a very optimistic person, hence your Joyful Order podcast, like, it's all about bringing joy and order, but I can have those days where I'm just like, I need to vent. I don't feel that it's fair to unleash my venting to certain people, even my husband. Like, my husband gets the worst, your spouse typically gets the worst of you and the best of you. But I don't always want to vent. And sometimes those frustrations were about, my spouse or my children. And I don't want to unpack that to the people that I trust, and I don't wanna go to my best friend or, my cousin or my sister and just vent and lash out about my spouse or my family. So I have gone to my journal and written some crazy stuff, just like you, where you're like, "I gotta just
Yeah.
write it out." And the freedom that comes from that, right, Sam? Like, it is just wow. So, for someone that is just starting journaling, what would you recommend is a simple practice to just simply, begin their day peacefully? You shared a couple, the I am statements, the gratitude, but for someone that wants to go the little step further, where is something that they can start?
I love this question. And so I don't call it a vent session anymore. Well, let me rephrase it. There are vent sessions. But on a day to day, especially for somebody just starting out, if you need to vent, feel free to call it a vent session. But I call it an emotional brain dump. If somebody is listening to this and they want to get started and they're not, they don't journal quite often, there's probably a lot on their brain. And so I find it really helpful rather than to start organizing right away, which is what a lot of people do. They immediately, I'm like, okay, I'm overwhelmed or I'm stressed, or I have a lot on my plate, let me organize. And they skip over the piece of like, well, what's causing those feelings? And like, let me process that, or at least let me honor that, right? And so that's what the emotional brain dump is like, let's just get it all out on paper. And what that's going to do is a few things. Number one, it's going to truly get it out of your brain, out of your heart, like, and you're going to see it, and you're going to see what are the trends. Like you might say the word overwhelm 5 times and you're like, "Okay, clearly it's the overwhelm." Or you might mention, like, a person's name a bunch of times, like, "Oh, I didn't realize that, like, that conversation that I had with that person 3 months ago is still impacting me." And so you're just gonna find words or sentences, things that will you will help you pick up on things to process and to journal through either right then and there, or just you can flip back to this brain dump on a rainy day when you're like, okay, I want to like really get through this, move through this bigger emotion. And that's like where you can start. So, emotional brain dump. Also, you can't do this right or wrong. Sometimes it is just like free write sentences and paragraphs, but sometimes it is like bullet points and to do lists. There's like 5 or 7 different ways of journaling. One is free writing, there's bullet points, there's letter writing. So, any way, shape, or form that it comes out is perfect. Once you have that emotional brain dump, then to peacefully pursue your day, that's where I would get a little bit more specific and ask some specific questions. The first is, how do I want to feel today? And sometimes people journal at night. So if you're doing this at night, just reverse it and say, how do I want to feel tomorrow? And get specific. Do you want to feel peaceful tomorrow? Or do you want to feel accomplished tomorrow? Do you want to feel courageous tomorrow? What is that emotion that you want to feel? Another question that I like to ask is, what will bring me joy today? Or what will bring me joy tomorrow? Being really intentional before we even organize our to do list, because that's always going to be there for us. So, really intentional with these feelings. And then, what is one goal that if I do just one thing out of all of the full list, that I would feel really good about accomplishing today or tomorrow? And then I do like a top 3 task list that sometimes I do get to all 3, but I like to circle that one where like if I do this one thing, and I did this all the time with my son too, before he went to daycare and he was at home with me and he was napping, I would always ask myself like, okay, he's napping. It might be for 2 hours or 20 minutes. If I got one thing done during this time, what would I feel the best about getting done? And sometimes that was working on a project, and sometimes it was doing dishes or something. So it really varies based on the season of life that you're in and what your priorities are and all of that. So those are a few of the questions that really help me make it more than just a to-do list and like day-to-day stuff and put some intentionality behind it.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And my audience is not hearing any of that for the first time. And I love that you are reiterating it because coming from another fellow coach and someone who specializes in journaling, and you are working with clients on this, like you see the benefits of this practice. Like I call it a brain dump and learning to prioritize and finding the patterns, right? That's what you want to see. Like what are the patterns that you are seeing there? Is it that you're overwhelmed? Is it like you said that there's a certain person where you are maybe haven't processed the emotions behind a certain event or something that has happened? And that's what like I tell, when I'm coaching also is like, okay, well, let's see what are the patterns that we're seeing there and addressing those to, help. Now, I think the bigger problem of this, and maybe you can give some recommendations to this, Samantha, is a lot of listeners are probably like, oh, I've tried to do that before and I just don't have time. That is a big thing. Like, I don't have time in the morning to sit and process my brain dump. I don't have time to sit and process my emotions. What would you say to somebody who has that challenge? I I'm gonna be a little blunt since this is we're listening to or it's my audience that's talking right now. I call them excuses. Like they're just excuses that you're not making the time. But what what advice would you give those people that are challenged in that area of saying, I just don't have the time, Sam?
Think it stems from the lack of experience. When you don't journal, there's a lot of fear, I think, of like what might come up, and you just think it's going to take a lot of time. And your first journal entry might take a lot of time. I actually usually suggest journal or typing out your first journal entry instead of writing it because you can type faster. There is actual research on the benefit of writing. So I do suggest writing. But for that first entry, it's like, yeah, just do that brain dump, type it out, like just get it out there. But then there's also research on the fact that you can like reduce stress and overwhelm and boost your immunity actually and heal faster physically. And all of this stuff just by journaling 5 to 15 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. So, a few things. One, it doesn't even have to be every single day. It's about 5 to 15 minutes. And one of my things with journaling is I set zero expectations. So, I know that there are some people that set a timer and they journal for a certain amount of time. I don't because I don't want to be like sitting there looking at the timer of like, okay, I have to keep going or whatnot. But I eventually got really curious of like, how long is it taking me in the mornings? And for me, it's about 6 or 7 minutes. And so what I did was I created a digital journal because I kept hearing that the time thing and that people weren't starting because they were writing and people like they got hand cramp. Like people will come up with a lot of excuses. I was like, you know what? All right, fine. And the prompts I gave you guys of like the how do you want to feel is very, very basic, very simple. But I turned it into a digital journal. And what I did was I put a song for each day. I only did 4 days too. And there's a song. So you can play it and journal while you listen to it. And each song is less than 5 minutes. Cause it's like you just need to start and like, and then you're gonna keep going, right? And so yeah, the time thing, just start and like see how it feels and you're going to want to keep going. It's this like fear of what's going to come out and the fear that is going to take so long then that keeps you from starting and even trying it.
I love that. I love the song. That's like you can get through one song of journaling. Come on. That's
Mhm.
really simple. And here's another one. And I want to know as a fellow, coach and stuff too, how you answered this one. So another thing that I hear of clients or even just friends and people like, "Oh, I don't do journaling because I don't want anybody to ever read my journals." Like, what if someone finds my journals? What if, the people that I live with find it? Or they say when I die, I am telling like their closest friend, my best friend or my sister or whoever to burn my journals. And I just had this conversation because I was encouraging a fellow, friend at church. We are talking about journaling. I'm starting a church community group called Soaping Through the Gospels, and it's a Bible study, and we, are journaling basically. And my friend, she was like, "I don't journal because I don't want anybody to ever find my journals." And I had to explain to her what the Bible study form of journaling was. I was like, "Well, this is really different. Like, you're not, you're not confessing your sins in here, right?" Hey friend, I got some exciting news to share with you. I want you to mark your calendars for Friday, November 29th, as we're revealing something that will transform how you connect with God's Word. The Soap the Gospels Journal. This journal will transform how you connect with God's Word. SOAP stands for Scripture, Observation, Application, and Prayer, a simple yet powerful way to study the Bible. You write down a verse, reflect on what it means, apply it to your life, and then end with a prayer. It's intentional, transformative, and helps God's Word speak directly to your heart. This guided journal takes you through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, helping you to grow deeper in your faith. It's beautifully designed with a hardcover, gold foil accents, a pen holder, and even a small little prayer pocket inside to hold your most precious prayers. Pre-orders are open December 2nd. Don't miss your chance to start your journey with the Soap the Gospels Journal. Visit yourjoyfulorder.com and subscribe to my email list to learn more. But what do you tell those people that just like you said too earlier, there's a fear of what they're going to kind of unpack, and that's
Mhm.
definitely a true fear, and I know that there are fears that I have shared of me actually writing things out too. However, that fear that somebody's gonna find the journal and read it, how do you address that with people?
Really asking, what are you afraid that they're going to find? And also, what will help you feel the safest as well? So and I can relate to that because especially when I first started journaling, I was still with my ex-husband and I was like, he might see some things in here. And so I actually did a few different things. One, I would hide my journal in a spot where I didn't think that he would find it. And then also if it was very sensitive information that I really didn't want him to find, I would type it out on my computer in Google, what is it? Google Docs, and I would put it in a folder that said, notes or like untyped, something that like did not say his name on it or something. And I would put it in there, because I was, like, putting stuff in there anyways to, like, keep track of stuff beforehand. So, you could do that, you could try hiding, but that isn't enough for some people. There actually is this is a very real fear, by the way, and so there's actually something called write and rip, where you write and then immediately you rip it out of the notebook and you rip it up, or sometimes people burn it. You could burn the actual piece of paper right away, or at when you finish the whole journal, you could burn the journal. It's like a whole ceremony that you could do. Um, I'm actually not one of those people that goes back to read journal entries. I know some people like to do that to see like where they were a month ago or a year ago. I've probably only done that 3 times in like 3 years maybe. Um, if that is you, you probably wouldn't want to like burn it or ruin it. But if you're not, the purpose for my, like, transformative journaling is just that, is, like, have the transformation to feel different and to get that shift, and looking back is just like, something cool to see how far you've come, but if it you're gonna get the transformation no matter what, and that safety of nobody reading it is more important than, like, having this perfectly curated journal that's somewhere. So, yeah, those are a few things that you could do.
I love the, write and rip. I've
Yeah.
never heard that before. I've told people, "Tell your best friend to burn them afterwards or when you die," kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I
Yeah.
I actually just had a friend, so that same conversation that was 2 of my friends at church, we were chatting about, journaling, and I was sharing just the impact of that it's had on my life. And one of my other friends had said, "My mom passed away several years ago, and my she gave the responsibility of my aunt for all of her journals." She said my mom was an avid journal and my aunt took all of her journals. And I was always asking my aunt, "Can I have those journals?" And she didn't give them to me until way later in my life. And my aunt kind of kept me from reading them until she knew that I could kind of unpack what was in there. And she said, and there were some things that my mom said about like me and my siblings that I was really shocked by, she had said. And I was like, that's one, I love the fact that her mother gave the responsibility to the aunt, but that the aunt held true to that responsibility and saying, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna give these to your children until I think they are ready for them, you know? But, like, my journals sit on the shelf in my bedroom, and if if at any time any of my family wants to come and open them up, they can. I think there's more fear of them to open those up than there is of, like,
Yeah.
me fearing that they're gonna open them. Like, in
Mhm.
full transparency, I'm a very transparent person. So I don't think that, like, for me personally, there is nothing in there that that I either didn't already say out loud to somebody or that I would be afraid to say, like, "Look, this is what was going on," you know? Because in all reality, I think it's important for us to actually process what we are working or what we're struggling with, So
Mhm.
if it's frustration with your children, if it's frustration with your spouse, if it's frustration with your mother, your sibling, or whatever, I think it's important that for us to, as we journal, we kind of vent it out, so to say, right? We have those vent sessions where we can just unpack it all. But then journaling also helps us to start to process those emotions. And as we learn and grow on how to, in a healthy way, process our emotions, I think it's important for us to have those conversations with the people that we love. So then
Yeah.
it's no surprise. Like, my journals are gonna be no surprise to my children or my spouse whatsoever. They're not gonna read anything in there that they're like, "Oh, wow." Because I've processed through that, and I've talked to my children about certain things, or I've talked to my spouse eventually at the time when I was writing it out, and I was like, "You know what? Like, I'm going to town." Like, no, because I know that I'd rather write out and lash out in paper than to lash out in front of my spouse or in front of my children. So I will unlash it in paper, and that allows me like so much relief. And then that then will allow me to kinda sit with it, pray about it for a while. That's how I process through it, and then start to have the conversations as I need to work through it. And I'm like, "Okay, I let it out in the way that it was surfaced at first, but then I let it out that way. So now let me process and have the conversations in person, that way. Does it always happen that way? Absolutely not. Do we lash out at each other? 100%. Like, yes, but not as often as we should because we're learning to process those things in a different way. We're not
Yeah.
perfect. But like I said, nothing in my journals are gonna be of shock at all to anybody in my
Yeah.
family? So anyhow, that's where I just wanna encourage people on that end because I know, like, the fear is real. The fear of processing through the emotions, first off, that's a real and true fear, and the fear of, "What if somebody reads this?" And that's where you just, I think, have to dig deep and really say, "Okay, if there is a fear of having these conversations with people, it's reevaluating one how like maybe boundaries, it's reevaluating, certain relationships. Like it it really got me to journaling, it really got me to process a lot of stuff. It's a form of therapy,
Yeah.
right, Sam? It's a form of
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we know
Yeah.
therapists use it and all that. It's not just something that, it just randomly, "Oh, we do it." Like, no, there is science behind it. Like you said, the science behind
Yeah.
doing
Right.
it versus typing it out. There's a whole science behind it too. Now,
Yeah.
this is one thing that I wanna know because I have a lot of young mothers that listen here, and I wanna know how journaling has impacted just your approach to motherhood. You're still a young mom, as in you have a little one, he's how old? Is he 3 or 4 now? He's 4?
Yeah. He's 4.
Yeah, he's 4. So,
Yeah.
how has your journaling impacted your approach just to motherhood and finding that balance? You're a single mom now. So, how do you find that balance with your motherhood, your personal and your professional life?
As a single mom, there's a lot of things and a lot of emotions and a lot of things to balance. And I think you're right. A lot of people don't want to even think about the emotion because then like processing it means that they're facing it and they fear that they're going to get stuck in it. Like they think, oh my gosh, I'm feeling really resentful towards this person, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Like thinking about it means that they're going to stay in that, when in reality, like allowing that feeling to happen and to feel it is the first step in releasing it. Like, and sometimes it's all you need. It's like allowing it and like being like, "Oh, this is what I'm feeling." Truthfully, and unless you experience it, then it's hard to even understand. But like sometimes it's just like it like releases off of you. But through journaling, that's how I've been able to feel more balanced, is because I came up with a way, and I call it my journal prompt flows, because I often don't start with just a journal prompt, which is when there's like one question typically. I found that a lot of times the prompts that I was coming up with didn't resonate with me like on the day that I picked one, and it was a little bit more frustrating. So I was kind of just coming up with what is something that I'm frustrated with about myself. Like, maybe self-sabotage, like the way that I self-sabotage or something, or like something specific about motherhood. Like I was ending every single day feeling so exhausted. And I journal in the mornings and I was starting every journal entry like yesterday was hard or yesterday was exhausting or I am so tired. And eventually got to a point of just like, okay, like I get it. Like, but what are we doing about it? You know what I mean? And so I started like prompting myself through it and like basically processing it in that way. So I stopped getting stuck in it and I started working through it. And the way that I do that is honoring it and then kind of asking myself, like, what does that mean? Either from the sense of like, what am I making that mean about me? Or what do I think others are thinking about me? A lot of times we don't wanna go there because it's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter what other people think," but it does, like, it heavily plays a role in what we do oftentimes, but often, again, once you identify like, "Oh, I think they're thinking this," we realize, "Well, that's just silly, it doesn't matter," but again, when we don't look at that, it's it has weight until we look at it and it's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter." Then my favorite part of my journaling process is just saying, "Is that true?" Is that whatever it is that you're going through, that belief or even like speaking of balancing it all in our to-do lists and peacefully pursuing it, like, do you have to do all of that? Or can you delegate? Or can you do all of this stuff? And the next piece is the clarity. Like, what is it that you actually want? Do you actually want to delegate some of those tasks? Do you actually want to rest today? Do you actually want to do what it is that you've been saying that you want to do for a long time? And then the last step is action. And it's like micro steps. So you said that you often have conversations. And so like I use to go from my emotion and like lashing out to getting to that conversation piece, I use journaling for all of it and you pray on it. So I feel like these are very similar and but we get to the same ending point, right? Like we have that conversation and conversations are really big though for some people. And so the action steps at the end is more than just a conversation. I kind of break up conversations into 3 steps. Number 1 is coming up with the outline of what it is that you wanna say, like, the main points. Because if you're like me, I start a big conversation, and I'm like, "Uh-oh, like, what is my main point? Like, what was I gonna say?" I, like, completely forget, right? And so that's, like, day 1 step is an outline. The second step is reaching out to the person and just saying, "Hey, I'd like to chat," and, like, setting up that time, and am I gonna do it via text message or call them or email them or, like, or at dinner tonight or whatever is appropriate, and then the third step is actually having the conversation. So, we get from this, like, feeling of whatever, overwhelm of all that we have on our plate, to working all the way through it, to then getting to action steps to how we actually want to feel or getting what we want, which is balance and that peace and that joy.
I wrote everything down that you gave right now, Sam, just so you know. I am going to make some really good, show notes for our audience because this was just all so, so, so good, and I will be full transparency here. I don't journal in this way. And I know that I need to. I have journals that give me like prompts, and some of the stuff is in there, but I don't use that tool on a daily basis. Um, my journaling basically consists of like my gratitude, my goals, and then a prayer. And then I have like a Bible study journal that I write. And then I just have like I have a specific prayer journal where I keep list of names of people that I'm praying for, and I come back often and I will update and say like, "Hey, that prayer was answered. This person is better or the situation got handled." And that's also like in the journal where I just have my vent sessions also kind of to say. So I love that, talking about like, what are you frustrated about today? When you lash out, like, are these things true? Like, what from this is true? And getting clarity. And then it's those simple prompts that I think can really lead you into a new direction and what it is that you are challenged with, what it is that you are processing, even the seasons that you're in. You're in a season where your little one, he's little right now. You're not going to be in this season long, you know? He's I have a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old right now. You're in the thick of it. Like you are in the serious thick of it because 4 years old. Good Lord, I remember when my boys were 4 years old. I felt overwhelmed every day. I was frustrated, like, I don't have me time. These kids are like leeches, like, sucking the life out of me, like, I wish I had these practices in place then because I definitely would have approached motherhood so differently, so differently. I didn't start these practices until maybe about, like, 7, 8 years ago, you know? And by then, my kids were a little bit much older and things were I don't wanna say easier, but some of the challenges that made motherhood overwhelming were a little less stressful during that time. Motherhood never gets less, you know, less overwhelming or less stressful, it's just different challenges in different seasons. So it is like you're kind of in that like still toddler preschool, you can't leave your
Yeah.
child alone. You can't retreat to your room to breathe because you're worried about what they're going to be doing out there. The same like if you're in a newborn season. And speaking to those young moms right now that are in those seasons right now, and you're like, I want to implement this, but I just can't because I don't have the time. There are small action steps, like you said, that you can take in this season to do this. And making it a priority is a big thing. Your child eventually sleeps. Bust out your journal then, 5 minutes to do that. Now, I wanna, just transition before we kinda wrap up a little bit. Sam, we are in the gratitude season right now. As this airs, it will be, airing just right on and about Thanksgiving time, and I'm a big, journaler for gratitude. I have seen how gratitude journaling has really transformed just my approach to the day. And on this topic of joyful productivity, I truly feel that me keeping a daily gratitude practice has allowed me to joyfully pursue my day in a great way. Now, I always challenge because I think there's like surface level journaling also, and then there's like deep, right? I mean, we can keep and that goes with gratitude. I shared with my audience so many times, you know, we all are grateful for our health. We all can be grateful for our faith, our family, Oh, like these are top level surface stuff that every day we can be grateful for. But when I do my gratitude practice, I look for really small things that we typically take for granted. I literally in my journal today, I wrote that I was grateful for the smell of my citrus candle burning. I wrote hold on, where's my journal? Okay, never mind. I was gonna open it because I'm like, what else did I write about? I wrote how that I was very grateful for the lineup of the guests that I have for this podcast season. And then I got very specific with a couple of other things. So, can you touch just a little bit about what you have learned on your gratitude practice of journaling and how that has kind of transformed your approach to journaling also?
I love your approach to gratitude journaling. I still remember the last time we talked, you had said that day you wrote something about a butterfly that you saw on a walk and some woman that was smiling or something. I still remember that. But yeah, and so like I said in the beginning, mine used to be so basic, like your health and all of that stuff. And then what I started to do after that was definitely get more specific because it just feels better. It feels so much nicer to be grateful about something that you can visualize. And so I would challenge myself to get specific about something. And so I still remember one day when my son was still a newborn, he was like sitting in my lap as I was doing this. And I said, like, I'm grateful for like my son's soft head or something. And I was just like laying my cheek on his head or something. And so I was doing that for a little while. And then I realized I wanted to like take it to the next step to like make it feel even better. So what I do now for gratitude is I visualize first. And so I closed my eyes and I actually did a guided visualization on my podcast for it, where I closed my eyes and I first just take a few deep breaths and then I go through my senses and I do this with either one moment or like two or three max. And I pick a moment and then go through my senses and think like who was there and what were the scents that I could smell at that point. And basically I just relive that moment, re-experience it. So like can still go back to that moment where my son was on my lap and I can picture the navy blue couch that I was on. And I can picture the journal and like I was sitting in the corner of that couch and I know where the staircase was in the house that I was in the Outer Banks. And like I can picture my cheek on that head of his and like just I can visualize it, right? And then after visualizing it, I would journal about that or even just like writing a little sentence. But after having felt it and like relived it, that feeling of gratitude stays with me for so much longer. And I notice that it also helps if it's about a person that you aren't with. I did this a lot when I was away from family, and it was with small moments too. Like one of the moments I would go to often, and you can use the same moment over and over again. I would use a moment where I went to the farmer's market with my mom, and I was just visualizing, like, walking through the market, and we both had our dogs with us. And I would just visualize, like, I remembered what she was wearing, and I was walking behind her, and I saw her dog and my dog and picking up produce and things like that, and truly just reliving it. What scents were there? Did I pick up any fruit? I remember, like, it was a hot day, and I when I went to go open my car door, it was hot, and you almost, like, too hot when you touch your seatbelt, so things like that, and this can take as long or as short as you want. If you do one moment, it probably takes me, like, 2 minutes maybe. If I do 3 moments, which is the most that I do, it takes, like, 7 to 10 minutes, but it just feels so cool and so good, and it's just I come out of that moment, like, so happy and, like, going into the next task that I have to do that day, feeling so at peace, no matter how important of a task that is.
I love that, Sam. I wrote that down and I actually kinda got emotional right now because as you were saying that, the visual gratitude of the senses, the touch, like the smell, like remembering that and how it allows that moment or whatever it is that you are seeking gratitude for to just stick so much. And literally, I got emotional because this morning as I was getting ready, I was thinking, and this goes back to the whole butterfly thing I had shared with you on our last conversation. And this wasn't on this podcast. I think I had shared on your podcast or when we chatted. I don't know. We chatted a few times, but I had shared that I had saw a black and gold butterfly, which reminds me of my cousin that had passed away. And this morning, I did this not intentionally, but when my cousin was sick in the hospital, there were a few moments that I really grabbed onto, and one of them was I went and, I had he was really sick during this time, so I took a big roll of paper, and I wrote some of his favorite Bible verses on there, and I plastered them all over his hospital room wall, and I said, "I want you to look at these and read them every day." And the verses that he gave me to write down were just impactful to me to know that these were the verses that he chose for me to write down. There were 3 or 4 different verses. It was 3 of them that were his verses, and then one of them was a verse that I wrote for him. So that moment of him telling me the verses as I wrote them down was something that I'm so grateful for. And then another moment, and that's what I was thinking about this morning, is he was sick and a nurse had came in. He hadn't eaten for days and he was looking to get a little bit better and they had brought him his first meal that he could actually eat in several days. So he couldn't mouth it himself, and the nurse kinda left it there for him and just walked away, and I was like, "Do you want me to feed him?" So, there was that moment where I actually got to feed him, and that was me not knowing that that was gonna be my last moment with my cousin. That was the last time that I saw him alive, and this morning, I was thinking about that because I visualize that all the time. I visualize both of those moments, um, and there are things to be grateful for.
Yeah.
I have written those things down in my gratitude journal so many times. I was thankful that I got to feed my cousin. I was thankful or grateful that I got to write these Bible verses for him to look at. Um,
Mhm.
and I think to every moment, like I actually can picture myself in the hospital room, the smell. Not the
Yeah.
best smell. It's not a good smell, but the smell, right? I'm sorry, I'm totally getting a mess right now. Um,
No, it's okay.
because as you shared that though, it just I'm like, I experienced that today, and it didn't even dawn on me that me going back to writing it down several times in my journal and visualizing every single thing, like, it's almost like each time I think about it, there's something new that pops up in it. Like, I picture something else, like, there was something that my cousin had said that and every time that I thought about it, each time that it comes up now, I'm like, "Oh, that's right, he did say that," you know? So, the visualization is so impactful for you to going back to key moments. And I never knew that those moments were gonna be the last moments with him, you know? But now that I have gone back to them so many times because I look back at how grateful I am for those moments, it has allowed me to grasp onto those moments that much deeper and that much more, where I'm never gonna forget those moments. And it's easy for certain moments like that to pass where we miss an opportunity to be grateful for them. We miss writing it down. We miss capturing it. And sometimes it's great to capture, we're in a world where everything is taking pictures. Like, oh, I want to remember this moment forever. But how oftentimes do we actually go back to, like, our phone or even print the picture out? Like, it's very rare that we do that, right? I mean, I know I have probably hundreds and thousands of pictures and videos and stuff in my phone, so to go back and look for that moment, it's a little overwhelming. But if I journal it and like, relive those moments in my brain, I visualize it, I don't need to go back to my phone to look for it. And it's just so important. Thank you for bringing that up, by the way. It just really triggered today. That's why I had that moment where I was thinking about the hospital room and I remembered something my cousin said that I hadn't remembered before, but because I come back to it because I just think of how grateful I was for that moment. Sam, thank you so much for your time. As we wrap up, I have just three questions that I like to end with all of my guests. So the first being, what is something that Sam loves to do that brings you joy?
Such a good question. I feel like since my headspace is on gratitude and this is Thanksgiving time, something that does bring me joy is kind of like taking those mental snapshots of in the moment. Like the more you do the visualization gratitude, the more you almost like take those pictures to come back to in the moment. And it makes you be so much more present, but also brings so much more joy to like the simple moments. Like at this past weekend, I was in what my son calls the cave. And it's just like this little place behind my house that is like overgrown and he just calls it the cave. And inside, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like a time where he's being independent, which, the leech phase is right now, but he's like starting to like explore on his own. And I'm like, oh, it's like a relief. It's so cool. So yeah, like just being really present in like teeny tiny moments brings me joy. I like that.
I love that. Love it. Okay, what is a song or even like an artist that is on your playlist that just gets your day going? Even like your workout routine and you hear that one song or that one artist and you're like, "Oh yes, I'm ready to go."
Yeah. I love Shut Up and Dance, but I also love, the Taylor Swift song Shake It Off. Like, anytime I have any sort of, like, emotion that I just need to literally, like, shake off through me, I play Taylor Swift.
I love it. Love, love, love Shake It Off. I'm like I love to dance through that one too. And then lastly, what is a favorite book that you have on your shelf that you would recommend to listeners that just really had an impact on your life?
I love The Audacity to Be Queen by Gina DeVee. One simple quote that she says in there is, "How good can you let your life get?" And that alone, especially in the context, it really opened my mind to so many possibilities.
Oh, I love it. The audacity to be queen.
Mhm.
Okay, I love it. I'm writing it down because I always look for book recommendations too. I have a bookshelf full of books of recommendations that I haven't read yet. I'm a book nerd, and I often I'm like, "Oh, I just gotta buy this one," and then it will sit on my shelf, but goal is to eventually get to it, so I gotta check that one out. But Samantha, thank you again for your time. Can you just share with my audience about your journaling community and just how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a journaling community called Emotionally Empowered, and it's for moms who are going through it, and not afraid to talk about the hard stuff. I think that's the beauty of it is that we all talk about the hard stuff, but it's also a very uplifting place. Like we don't get stuck in it. And so it's a really empowering community to be a part of. So you can learn more about that and just connect with me over on Instagram at samantha.s.says. And even if you took anything away from this episode, I would love to hear more about anything that you came up with when you journaled and also how your holiday is going too.
Awesome. So thank you again so much, Sam. And for my audience, go and have an amazing holiday season. And until next time, go chase joy.